Hey, how is it going everybody? In this video I'm going to be showing you guys how to set up the Bravado Banshee 900R for drifting in GTA 5. So in this video I'm going to pretty much detail every single part you guys need for the build itself, then I'm going to show you guys how to stance the car and then ultimately drift it with some controller camera gameplay, so that way you guys get the full picture on how to drift this car. I'm really excited to make this video because this is one of the more popular drift cars in the game and a lot of people have requested it, but as always, if you guys want to see any future builds, you guys want to see any specific cars for me to do a drift build on, then leave those down in the comments, as the most liked comment will be the one that I feature in the next video. Anyways, moving on to some information about the Banshee 900R in specific. This is actually a Supers class vehicle, and you can get this car by upgrading a normal Bravado Banshee to the Banshee 900R in Benny's. So the original Banshee is going to cost you $105,000, and you can pick it up from the Legendary Motorsport website or from the Benny's website. And then the Benny's upgrade is $565,000, so just for the car itself you're looking at about $670,000, and then after the drift upgrades, which I'm going to cover in a little bit, the cost will be around $800,000, and obviously that can fluctuate all the way up to about $1 million if you do any other aesthetic upgrades. So yeah, this is definitely not a super cheap build, but it also isn't super expensive, especially in comparison to some of the new LS tuner vehicles, which is nice, and I think that the cost really justifies this car's driftability. This is one of the better drift cars in the game. As you guys might be able to notice here, this is actually supposed to be a replica of Han's Mazda RX-7 FD from the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. So if you guys want to see me recreate that car in its entirety, then I do have a video on that on my channel, so definitely go and check that out. But with that all said, let's move into Benny's and start going through all the parts you're going to need for this build. Alright, so now we're in Benny's and I'm going to go through pretty much all of the necessary upgrades you're going to need for this drift build in specific. Anything I don't cover here is going to be totally down to your own personal preference. First up, we're going to take a look at the brakes, and for these I'd recommend just leaving them stock. In the event that you are going for a really high angle entry or you experience any sort of oversteer, you're going to want to use the brakes to kind of reel the car back in and to recenter it. And in order to do that without killing the drift, you don't want to have really strong brakes, because otherwise it's going to slow the car down too much. So for that, I just recommend leaving the brake stock. Next up, we're going to move on to the engine tune, and for this, obviously, engine tunes are very good power upgrades, probably one of the most effective power upgrades that you can do, and of course, more power is better for pretty much any drift car you're setting up, so for this build, I just recommend upgrading the engine as much as you can. Moving back out here, the next upgrade to take a look at is a little ways down because a lot of this stuff isn't going to make much of a difference, and we're going to take a look at the spoiler. And for this, I just recommend leaving the spoiler off, otherwise I think it's going to add a little bit too much grip, which can kind of hinder the car's performance in those really high speed drifts. However, I do understand that the Bravado Banshee 900R in specific is very slippery, so if you guys drift it and maybe you're having a lot of problems with oversteer and you absolutely need more grip, then maybe you can come back and put a spoiler on, but for starters, I recommend just leaving the spoiler off. The next upgrade we're going to take a look at is the suspension. Now you guys might know this already, but for pretty much all of the non-LS tuner vehicles that you stance with a weapon, the car is going to be more slippery the lower the suspension is before you stance it. So with that in mind, for the Bravado Banshee 900R, it already is a very slippery car after you stance it, so you could leave the suspension stock if you wanted to, but for me, just to give it a little bit of extra slipperiness, I would recommend doing the lowered suspension. I wouldn't go any lower than this, otherwise the car is going to be a little bit hard to handle. It's going to be too slippery and it might end up spinning out. So yeah, definitely I think lowered suspension or just leave it stock. I think those are the best two options. Next up is the transmission. This is another really important upgrade. Make sure you upgrade the transmission as much as possible, because this responsiveness is going to make downshifting really easy, whether you're doing lower speed drifts in first gear and you're relying on tapping the handbrake, or you're using the mid-drive speed boost in those higher speed drifts. Making sure the transmission is as responsive as possible is really going to help, so upgrade it as much as you can. The next upgrade to take a look at is the turbo, and of course, like the engine, the turbo is another really important power upgrade. It's kind of like the icing on the cake, so I would recommend doing the turbo tuning upgrade if you have it unlocked. And last but not least, we're going to take a look at wheels, more specifically wheel type. Now, here you guys can choose pretty much whatever wheels that you'd like. Now, I know that a lot of people in the drifting community do believe that both muscle and SUV wheels provide the least grip. So if you guys want to run those, then definitely feel free to do so. I really haven't noticed much of a difference, especially with a car like the Banshee 900R. It's so slippery to begin with that tire type really doesn't affect this car all that much. But if you guys want to run those, either SUV or muscle wheels are known to be the least grippy, but generally speaking, you can run pretty much any wheel type that you'd like. The next upgrade we're going to cover is super important, and this is bulletproof tires. So in tire enhancements, obviously you're going to want to make sure that your tires are standard. Do not do the bulletproof tire upgrade. In just a little bit, I'm going to be showing you guys how to stance the Banshee 900R, and in order to do that, you're going to want to use a weapon. And for whatever reason, when you have bulletproof tires on a car, you cannot stance it using a weapon. It affects the hitbox around the wheels, which makes it impossible to stance. So in order to be able to stance the car, we're going to leave the bulletproof tires off for this build. And moving back out, those are pretty much all the upgrades you're going to need for this build. Anything like the windows, the aesthetic upgrades, of course anything besides a spoiler is pretty much down to your own personal preference, and I obviously went over all the other performance upgrades as well, so that's pretty much all you're going to need for the build. So yeah guys, with that in mind, let's take this car to the track and then we'll stance it up and ultimately start drifting with it. Alright guys, so we're setting up a custom race now so that way I can go in and show you guys how to stance the 900R and ultimately get to drifting with it, and I'll also again be including a controller camera as well. And before we get started with that, one really important tip I have: whenever you build up a drift car like this and you want to go in and see how to stance it and then obviously get started drifting with it, I'd recommend starting up a GTA race rather than just doing it in a free mode session. A GTA race makes it really easy to respawn your car if you ever get it damaged, plus you can also use your weapons to stance your car. You can figure out where you need to shoot on the car to stance it without blowing it up, and you won't have to pay a ton of insurance premiums. So definitely I think the move is for you guys to just practice in a GTA race, so that way it's really easy to respawn and to reset if you mess up. So with that all said, let's get this race started so I can show you guys how to stance the 900R and ultimately drift with it. Alright guys, so we're prepping to stance the 900R now. So the first step in this process is picking a weapon. Obviously you're going to want to make sure you pick nothing that's too crazy or overpowered, so pretty much any pistol, SMG, AR, or sniper rifle. Nothing too crazy, no MGs, no miniguns, no shotguns. Those are going to damage your car way too much. For the purpose of stancing this car pretty quickly, I'm just going to use the AR, so that way it's a little bit easier for you guys to see, and also it goes fairly quickly. So we're going to first start off by stancing the front wheels, and for these it's pretty simple. It's pretty much like any other normal car that you'd stance. All you need to do is shoot in the lower half of the wheel just below where that brake rotor is. So you'll see right here, I'll shoot and then the car will drop once. You can see it got lower a little bit there, and then we'll shoot a little bit more, and then the car drops twice. That was pretty noticeable. You can see just how low the front of the car is in comparison to the rear. Let's do the other front wheel and then we'll move on to the rear wheels. So again, just shooting below that brake rotor, and then we'll shoot there. Car drops once, and then car drops twice. Very quick and easy to do the front wheels. The rear wheels require a little bit more precision though. So on the Banshee 900R, the body kit that's applied to it adds like these rear spats, and where these kind of spat pieces meet up with the rear bumper, kind of along that seam, is where you're going to want to shoot. So as you guys can see, I'm shooting just along this line where these three bolts are. I'm going to shoot right around here, and you guys will see the car drop once. There you go, it dropped once, and then we're going to shoot again, and then the car drops twice. So again, just make sure you shoot in that spot, and then you should be good to go for lowering the rears. These don't lower normally. If you shoot in here, the car is eventually going to start smoking and might eventually explode on you as well. Once again, I'm going to show you guys how to stance the rears. Find that seam where the spat meets up with the rear bumper, and then just shoot in this location. You'll see it drop once. There you go. And then we'll shoot again, and then you'll see it drop twice. And boom, there you go, the car is stanced up. As you can see, it's much lower than it was before. You can see kind of exactly where I was shooting to stance the rears. Pretty much shooting in this location will stance them up just fine. You won't blow up your car or damage it unnecessarily or anything like that. But yeah, now all four wheels are stanced, so we're good to go ahead and drift this car. So right now I'm going to give a little bit of a drifting review, and then we're going to move on to the controller camera gameplay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Bravado Banshee 900R's driftability. I'm sure if you guys have watched any sort of GTA 5 drifting videos, you've seen this car at some point. It's an incredibly well-known and popular drift car, but for a lot of good reasons. First off, this car makes an insane amount of power that allows it to hold drifts at very high speeds. It's also very easy to drift at low speeds, and you can hold out fairly long drifts in first gear, which makes it a really great car for beginners to practice with. However, at higher speeds, this car does require a lot more skill to be able to control. It's almost a little bit too powerful for its own good because the back end kicks out so easily, and because the mid-drive speed boost is so strong, you will need to have quite a bit of practice to be able to link this car through those longer corners without losing control. In addition to that, this car is extremely weak and very susceptible to damage. It's already very sensitive to bumps to begin with, and even the slightest bit of damage can make this car almost undrivable, as it'll be way too slippery. If this car had a bit more overall stability and steering angle, it would be even better, but even then, this car is still great for drifting, and in my opinion is the most capable drift car in the game. game. There's also some room to play around with tuning this car, as I talked about earlier on during the build, meaning that the Banshee 900R isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of drift car. Plus, it's not that expensive compared to some of the newer LS tuner cars that we got, while still offering great customization and far outperforming those cars when it comes to drifting. The 900R does have its flaws, but it packs a punch and is definitely one of the best cars for drifting in GTA 5. So now I'm going to be showing you guys some gameplay with a controller camera where I'm drifting the Banshee 900R at some of my favorite spots around the map. Hopefully seeing all of my inputs as I'm drifting helps you guys better understand how I'm able to drift such a powerful car. So that will conclude my full drift build on the Bravado Banshee 900R. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, feel free to leave suggestions for future drift builds you'd like to see me do, and I'll definitely make those happen. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful, feel free to drop a like on it, leave any feedback or questions in the comments down below, and also consider subscribing to my channel if you want to see more GTA 5 drifting content like this. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a great day.